Well, it is 6:30, so I'm going to get us started here. So I'll call the meeting to order. This is Amy Edwards. Today is December the 7th. It is 6:30 p.m. and this is the work session for the Rockford Area Schools Board of Education. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. All right, next on to the board roll call. Kevin Campbell.
Here.
Eric Gordy.
Here.
Jessica Johnson.
Here.
Brady Anderson.
Here.
Beth Praska.
Here.
Amy Edwards here. And we have a full board present this evening. Just let me jump back into my agenda. With that, I would ask for a approval of the agenda tonight.
Eric Gordy, I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda as presented.
Great, thank you, Mr. Gordy. We have a first from Eric Gordy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. A second from Brady Anderson. First and a second. Any further discussion about the agenda tonight? All right, pending no further discussion, as we are all virtual this evening, this will be a roll call vote, beginning with Beth Praska.
Aye.
Jessica Johnson.
Aye.
Kevin Campbell.
Aye.
Brady Anderson.
Aye.
Eric Gordy.
Aye.
Amy Edwards, aye. The agenda passes as presented. Thank you all. All right, so let's jump into our agenda. So this evening we have Mr. Keller with us, and as you'll see in your board packet, this is really an opportunity to orient the board around some of the key updates out of our learning and development department, and so distance learning, assessments, staff developments, those were all topics that the board has lifted up on a variety of different occasions, requesting, more information and an opportunity to orient ourselves to some of the plans and some of the feedback. And I will just add that from a board perspective, our curriculum development board liaisons are Eric and Jessica, correct? From a curriculum advisory committee. Great, thank you. And that, no? Yes, yep. And then from a staff development perspective, it is Eric and Beth, or is it Jessica and Beth?
I thought it was Eric and me on the curriculum and Jessica and me on the professional development.
Correct, thank you. All right, great. I just like to orient. That's why I didn't have it in front of me. I just wanted to orient the whole board to just kind of who we each have our own committees that we partner on and as liaisons to the board. So just wanted to make sure that we were all oriented to that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Dean to tee up this agenda topic further, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Keller for the bulk of the dialogue this evening.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Edwards. Leading into this discussion with distance learning, I just wanted to kind of lay some background work on some of the things that have happened over the past 3 weeks to get us to this point. Since the last board meeting, a lot of things have transpired. And again, just leading up to where we are this evening, and I just wanted to briefly bullet this just in case you're getting questions. But as you know, we did transition our secondary kids, middle school and high school, to full distance learning within the last 3 weeks. We transitioned our elementary into a true hybrid model, meaning they have the distance learning day. We've issued over 480 devices in the last 3 weeks. 3 full professional development days. Our RCC was shut down again due to the executive order. Athletics, as you know, has been placed on pause. And right now we're kind of in a holding pattern to decide, waiting to see what the Minnesota State High School League is going to do. And then the Minnesota State High School League is waiting for what the governor is going to do on the 18th. We had a pretty significant transition with meal distribution. That's been quite the undertaking. You wouldn't think so, but it really has been in terms of pulling it together and the logistics of it. Due to the transition with the models, we've had to make some transportation changes, facility upgrades, and then just our ongoing responses to the quarantines and the executive order. So I just bring that to your attention because it's only been 3 weeks. I'm actually glad I had a chance to preview that before the next board meeting in 2 more weeks, because in 2 more weeks I could have a whole new list. But yeah, so just again, have that on your radar just in case you're getting questions from anyone in the community. But moving on to distance learning. Before we move before I hand it over to Kevin, we are following up from the last board meeting where the conversation at CAC was discussed, and the board wanted a little bit more information about our distance learning and how the parents were feeling. And so 3 weeks ago, we had just completed the survey and didn't have an opportunity to share that with the board. So we're going to do that this evening. But just to tee it up a little bit for Kevin, at the time of this survey, we had it was exactly 67 students in distance learning. And you need to know that between the time of this survey and right now, it's increased about 12 students. We've had some parents who are choosing, likely because of the raging COVID that's going on in the communities right now, are choosing to go distance learning with their kiddos. So again, at the time of the survey, it was 67 students. And as you will see, we had about half respond. So about 50% of the parents at that time. And then I know there's going to be conversations about the curriculum. There's going to be conversations about the curriculum. But I just want to take us back for a moment that when we made the decision to go to Culver, to use the Culver curriculum back in August, we had no idea. We had no idea how many families would choose the online distance learning full time. We had no idea what grade levels. And so given the recommendation of the former teaching and learning director and the current teaching and learning directive, we made the decision back in August to purchase this curriculum and not put that burden on our teachers to create an online curriculum for K4. So anyways, I am going to hand it over to Kevin to talk a little bit more about the survey that he conducted with the distance learning parents. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, I'm sorry. I got 2 devices going here, so you're going to see my face on here a couple times here. So, Amanda, thank you for running this for me here. Hey, Rhonda, I would add to your bullet list of things here. I was just thinking about some of the pieces that we've put out in the last 3 weeks. Excuse me. In those last 3 weeks, we've also had the opportunity to train all the elementary teachers on a couple of new systems. One of the pieces that we talked about moving forward was the Clever system. And the big piece with Clever is that it allows students easy access to all their digital resources. And it takes a lot of alignment and a lot of work to kind of put that into place. that's been one of the first things that I asked for when I came into Rockford. I asked, let's look into the Clever process and really, I think it's a big deal. It's a game changer as we move forward, particularly now that we're looking at one-to-one as we go out to the future. And we also talked about, sending home devices with our elementary kids. It just makes it a lot easier for the students to log in now. Literally, the kids open up their Chromebooks, and I really do like the Chromebooks that were ordered for our elementary kids. They're a touchscreen version. They also have a keyboard built into it. That's kind of a nice feature with that particular Chromebook. But they open it up, they hit one button on the touchscreen and hold a QR code up, and it brings them directly to the digital resources. There is no typing for a kindergartner, their username and password. And once they've practiced that in school a few times, they're really going to kind of pick up the pace and get into this a lot. So we spent last week training kids in the elementary classrooms. We spent last week training teachers. We took time last week to implement something called Reading A to Z RAS Kids. That was a request that was made by all of the different grade levels. And so we put a lot of pieces into place for our elementary teachers. There's just been continued, constant, ongoing tech integration work going on at the elementary, middle, and high school. Middle school implemented a ton of new distance learning tools. The high school went ahead and moved it with a couple new distance learning tools. But that work was a pretty heavy lift over these last 2 weeks. And from what I've heard, just nothing formal, but the first take on the elementary stuff coming back was really positive. We got some good positive feedback, at least from the parents that were calling the elementary school. I've had an opportunity to talk to a couple of parents over the phone, and they were asking about how can they, if they want to transition to distance learning, what is that process? So we've had the opportunity to talk about that a little bit too. The other pieces that we've done over the last 3 weeks is we got into the middle school and trained those teachers around the first look at their FAST data. We've also had the opportunity to bring in a trainer from Renaissance, which is the company that sponsors the STAR 9th and 10th grade data that we pulled. They came in and did the first round, I think, of 4 trainings that they're going to provide for us too. So, and then on top of that, a lot of work around IB authorization, which is actually going to come up at the next CAC meeting when we have that. So a lot of things happening kind of as we moved along. One of the pieces that we looked at is the distance learning survey. And this is only for our elementary students. As we kind of push through this and look at the survey results, just know that this is for those 65 students that were in distance learning at Reams only. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So Amanda, you're running this for me. I appreciate you driving this. We sent out, it was a fairly short survey, but it was straight to the point here. We were asking, basically, were you happy about the synchronous and asynchronous work that we're pushing out to kids here? And I think the feedback was pretty positive from what we got back. 72 to 80% are happy about the amounts of synchronous and asynchronous work that we're working with at this time. One of the pieces I know that we're looking at working on as we move forward is kind of that social emotional part. That's a discussion I've had with all 3 of the principals, but definitely with this group. And we are kind of leaning on these 3 a little bit to talk. How are they going about working with our elementary kids in distance learning, just in case we have a situation where we've got to move forward with our other classrooms. We had the opportunity to kind of meet as a larger group at Reams, and it really did help to have their voice in that room and to be able to bring that knowledge that they've had. I can tell you that the experience that our kids are getting right now this fall and this winter is very different than what we did last spring. And it is more of an aligned approach to distance learning as we move forward. So when we talk about creating an interactive classroom, they are trying to align what we're doing in the distance learning classrooms with what's happening at Reams. They're making a real conscious effort about trying to get kids involved with, like, I guess, school spirit and those types of activities as we move forward. I think that's going to be an important part. Yeah, it's fun, and they have their little jammy days and little dress up days as they move through. And I think that's an important piece that, as I see my own girls go through that distance learning, it's an important part to get that connection. And so it's nobody would by choice put a kindergartner into distance learning, I'm telling you, unless they had to. And so I'm really happy to see that 80% of the folks are happy with the amount of asynchronous time, and which says then, okay, well, there's 20% that are unhappy. Well, part of that is they do want less, and part of it is that they do want more, and it was equal. It was pretty close to being equal to we did want more, we did want less. And so, you got some that want a little bit more and some that are wanting a little bit less. So Amanda, next slide, please. So synchronous time, okay. So they would like more synchronous time, a little less synchronous time. We've got 36 responses there. That's 72.2%. The second one, Amanda, is that the asynchronous time? Okay, so the feedback here, okay. Thank you. Take a minute here and take a look at some of these reactions to, I think on the left-hand side, the feedback is a little bit more positive, and on the right-hand side, we're looking at kind of maybe some of the questions that we had. And one of the biggest struggles, like it's going to come up over and over again, is that struggle with technology. And I really do believe that the implementation of Clever is going to make a big difference with the technology integration. Again, like I said, last Friday, it kind of went live with our elementary folks. And I will say that, yeah, we can use Clever with our middle school and high school kids, and likely we will implement that as we go along. But the goal was really to get those K1, 2 kids going. We did do it up through 4th grade right now. And as we bring on and any new tools as we move forward, it takes a little time to kind of get that up and running, but it's a good process. We've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks about rostering kids and what's the best process to go through it. We had to go back and literally re-roster every kid in Seesaw and a lot of the other pieces as we move through. So. Anything standing out for you regarding that feedback for the synchronous learning piece here that you want to talk about or that we want to explore a little farther? And I think, when I see things like trying to use that trackpad for writing and drawing is nearly impossible. I really do think that the touch screens are going to make it a little bit different. If you've ever seen an elementary kid work with it, it's just a different feel, and I empathize with that piece there. More instructor-led interactions. Yep, and we've talked about that as a team. Look at the positive side there. Focus on the tasks. The synchronous learning has been the most beneficial. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just for the board, as we kind of go through this, just if you do have comments or questions, just either unmute yourself so I can see that you're looking to say something, or use the raise the hand function, whichever works easier for you.
And feel free to, I think we got to kind of have more of a flow discussion here than me trying to read this out to you. I don't want to read it to you. I mean, you could all read the answers here. I know you had an opportunity to see it, but I mean, as we look at this too, there's a lot of positive here. And like I said, I think we took a lot of what we learned last spring and applied it. And have applied it to all 4. We did a nice job of really thinking through some of the pieces here, and at the same time we had to learn on the fly. Yes, Rhonda.
No, I was just going to tell you or remind you, the board has had an opportunity to look at this PowerPoint. Okay. So they've had an opportunity to kind of read through the bulleted items.
All right. Thank you. All right. With that, yes. Question 2: how are you feeling about that asynchronous time? Again, 80% of asynchronous time, 80% happy with the amount of asynchronous time as we move forward. And again, some not, some for it. We need multiple choice questions. I mean, some of these, again, we got to remember that these are our data points, but we got to take it a little bit with a grain of salt. I would argue that we got to kind of look at the big picture as we move through. I think the asynchronous learning portion is an important part, and I don't know if you realize this or not, but the governor did make part of his plan that asynchronous need, and I think that's in response to some of the stresses that are put on teachers that are teaching at a distance here. It is really hard to do it day after day, hour after hour, And the plans that we put into place here, I do like what the middle school and the high school have done, and we can talk about that a little bit once we're done here. Next one, Amanda. All right, describe the amount of work. Just right, 88.6%. Yep. Would like a little more. Okay, good mix of live and interactive. Okay. I like that last point, by the way. Some things are lost in translation, but the teacher adapts to this well. And it is difficult from a distance, obviously, as you're all quite aware. So next, Amanda. So level of communications with Reams, about 60%, 66% liked it, 30% would like a little bit more. And I think what we kind of took from that conversation is that some of the distance learning parents felt like they weren't necessarily getting, again, to be part of the spirit, part of the daily routines of what was happening. And so we listened to that and have worked hard to transition some of those experiences out for our students here. So yeah, right there. The district communication seems to include the kids that are in school and not a mention to the DL kids. And I don't think that was on purpose. I think the messages were sent out to all students, but I feel like they maybe, like they said, were lost a little bit in translation there too. And instead of calling out distance learning kids specifically, it was kind of called out as Reams kids. And I think we've tried to remedy that situation. So the learning apps, how happy are you about those learning apps? And our platforms. So the platforms, like we said, I can tell you that as we move forward to those Fridays, the platforms, I see it, Jessica, give me 1 second here. The platform that we've kind of pushed forward, at least for our specialists, is Seesaw, even to 3rd and 4th graders using distance learning. And the reasons why we went forward with Seesaw instead of Google Classroom was just the interactive part of Seesaw. Is just a little bit easier, and our specialists are seeing so many kids that they wanted to try to stay on one platform, and Seesaw seemed to be the way to go. So they were working with our K4 students and seeing all 400 and almost 500 kids a week versus just their classroom. And so Seesaw is the way we went with that. Jessica.
Back on the graph, the one prior to this, yeah, that one there. What's the 0, 5, 10, 15 and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 represent?
That's got to be the number of responses. And Amanda, can you help me with this one a little bit here? Because I'm a little confused by this one myself. I would have to go back into the.
Yeah, like
I hear what you're saying.
The bottom, is that referring to there's 5 separate apps that they had to say that they were happy with, or that's what I was just curious about. What do they represent? I'm assuming the 0, 5, 10, 15 is the people, the number of people who are happy with it, but then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I wasn't sure what they represent.
There's a scale on the survey saying 1 through 5, 1 being low, 5 being extremely happy. That's what the survey.
Okay.
Oh, that's all. Okay.
Oh, that makes sense. There you go. That makes sense. Thanks, Eric.
For that, Gordy, because I was trying to find it.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, the feedback that we've gotten over Seesaw has been pretty solid, and even the Google Classroom has been good too. Yeah, Brady.
Brady?
Yeah, so obviously the communication, huge part of things, especially with our distance students, seeing 30 some odd percent either in the medium to not happy. Obviously it's great that 60% are happy, but what about, you mentioned we were making some changes. What are an example of some of those changes that we're making to ensure that our distance learning students feel more included with the district level communications? One
of the big things that we talked about was, what about like morning announcements? How are we going to kind of transmit that over distance learning? And then we put in some real specific plans at at all 3 buildings. Just how can we include the morning? Well, and think about it now from a distance. I think I'm trying to think. It's like mornings with Mr. Menard now. I think is his way of going about pushing out those morning announcements. I know the middle school and the elementary have taken up that same type of process. In addition to that, just really specifically calling out the distance learners in some of the communications that are going out directly to those kids has just been. Sometimes you just don't think about that, and I think that specific perspective was kind of picked up on that. And like I said, the addition to some of the kind of the spirit week type things, just to kind of get the kids excited about coming to distance learning school. It's a tricky balance there. And I think it's an important piece. I'm going to argue that the asynchronous time on Fridays, though, has been already valuable. I can already see a little bit difference in how the teachers are communicating with each other, and our distance learning teachers have a little bit more time to communicate with our in-class teachers, and I think that's going to help our communication too, Brady. So,
great,
Good questions.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brady. You can, if you're done, you can put your hand down. I don't call on you again. And then I think Jessica, you had a question. Yep. Great.
Yeah, so my looking here, people are really happy with Seesaw, and I'm sure those teachers have been putting a ton of work into things. From some of the comments, and I read through the comments on the other piece of information that was shared with us. There were comments about Calvert, and like one of them right here, just kind of the one about it not being a substitute for for teacher-led interaction, and just wondering, are we planning to continue forward with that, or are we going to Rockfordize what we're doing?
Well, I think we've been Rockfordizing as we've gone along here too, and especially with 2 brand new teachers teaching 3 of the 5 classes. This is like we talked about earlier when we started today. We didn't know what we were necessarily getting for numbers and where we were at. That being said, the 2 teachers that we've pulled in have been excellent and really have done a fine job of becoming Rockford teachers and Rockfordizing the curriculum as we've gone through. Both of them have begun to work a little bit more closely with the classroom teachers and are starting to pull in more of the lessons that we're doing. We won't be purchasing any more that curriculum from Calvert, but we do have it. We can pull from it. We'll use some. There are some digital resources with it. I know the science and parts are very popular. It is a little tricky to use. It is meant for kind of homeschooling. And so as they've kind of moved through that curriculum, they've pulled the pieces that they like and they leave what they don't. We can pull in from Rockford what we like and leave what we don't like there too. I mean, there is a very big difference between pulling curriculum for distance learning and have it in a model that's useful for kids too. So as they become more proficient with Seesaw and the techniques that are necessary for Google Classroom, I think they've done a much better job as we've kind of moved through this process here. So yes, I would say that they have definitely kind of pulled it in, and we've been talking about Rockfordizing it. I like that term, Rockfordizing our curriculum as we've kind of moved through. So yeah, they are working closely with those teachers, and I do believe that these Fridays, these times for asynchronous learning, are going to give them even more time to kind of work together, and they do work together very closely. Those 3 teachers work together very closely as a PLC unit. Also, they've done a nice job with that. We've stated, when I say we, I'm saying teaching and learning. Brenda at Reams has stayed in very close contact with them, and we've spent a lot of time working with them over the last couple of weeks, since the beginning of the year, making sure that they're up to speed, and they did get training directly from Calvert. It's not something that they just were left to on their own, and they can continue to access some of that information as they move through and as seems fit. Eric,
Thank
got
you.
your hand up there. All right.
Using technology. So Kevin, one of the questions, so I know that there is digital content available with much of the curriculum that we've purchased, or much, textbooks aren't curriculum, sorry. Much of the textbooks and things that we've purchased from our vendors. One of the comments from your distance learning folk was that they didn't have full access to all of that, math specifically. Had that been Is there a plan to allow that full access to all the digital materials provided by our publishers as well to those kids instead of relying on Calvert and the creation of other things?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It is. They have access to any of that material that's available digital too. There's nothing holding them back from it or anything like that. No. So yes, the answer is yes to that, Eric.
And being new teachers, training, and all that stuff is probably a thing, right? I mean, it's new people.
Well, and being new teachers, that's a little bit tricky, and that's where we're trying to get them a little bit integrated in with their PLCs. The tricky part is that if you recall, our third and fourth grade teacher, that's 2 curriculums that she's working with. Second grade's a little bit easier with just that singleton, but she's got a lot of kids, and they are, like we said, they are getting more and more kids in those classes, and so. It's tough. It's tough to teach 2 grades at once. They're doing a nice job with what they've got, but it's a tricky situation. And we're doing our best to support them, and they have access to the same materials that our in-class teachers have, and they have access to the Calvert materials also.
Thank you. Great.
Next one, Amanda.
Eric, you can put your hand down too.
Okay. Oh, Brady, are you back up? I do kind of like the hand raising.
Yeah,
it's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's just I'm trying to use my Google Meet etiquette here. I'm more of a Zoom guy, so this is all new to me.
It's all right.
I'll take my hand down now. The question that I have is, okay, this is great, distance learning. And we've asked this question before. Are we ready? If given, I think our numbers are at 190 some now per 10,000, which is terrible. I wish people would just do their parts, stay healthy, and keep this virus contained. But that's a sidebar. Are we ready from a elementary school perspective to go full distance? We have full-time teachers doing this. Are we ready to make the transition? Should we need to? I know this has been great to get information. This is a little bit off topic. Looking forward, are we ready? Do we have the resources we need? Do we need to buy anything else? That's the question.
Well, Brady, we're getting there. I wouldn't say that we're ready today, but we're in a better place today than we were a week ago, for sure. It was one of the reasons why we were leaning into getting those devices in the hands of our kids before Thanksgiving break, because you're right, the numbers are outrageous. I think Wright County went over 200 last report. So we were pretty anxious about getting the devices in the hands of our kids and getting our teachers trained, because we wanted the kids to have at least some time in person with their teacher to manipulate the device, to practice practice opening it and how to carry it and how to use your clever, how to open it with the what do you call it?
Clever.
But the card, the QR
code.
QR code.
And so we wanted kids and teachers to have that time in person to prepare us just in case tomorrow. Brady, tomorrow we could be notified that, we have to shut it down. And so we're in a much better place today than we were even, a week ago. And so to answer your question, are our teachers prepared? If we had to transition today, we would be as prepared as we are today. But every day that passes where kids can use those devices during the school day, as well as taking them home on Friday, if we ever got to that point where we did have to shut it down, our kids and our teachers would be in a much better place to continue with instruction. And that's kind of where we're at. We just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
And I would add to that too, those 3 days we spent before Thanksgiving went a long ways. There were some teachers that weren't particularly confident that they could pull it off. And I really think that pushed the staff over over that confidence hump that they needed to get over, and they had the opportunity to see the devices. The first thing we did is we got those Chromebooks in the hands of the teachers, and we took a morning and spent the morning with them, just opening them and messing around with the touchscreen. They need to familiarize themselves with that too. If you've never worked, with a touchscreen Chromebook, it's a little different. It's different situation there, and just how do you we talked about how do you physically carry that Chromebook around. What's it going to look like? Yeah, I know. What's it going to look like in that classroom? Kind of moving forward. Right now, we're not sending home any cords with the kids to charge it. So, I mean, we're really putting some emphasis on responsibility. They'll do just fine over the weekend without a cord. Now, if we have to go into a longer time, then yes, we're aware of that. We know that that's going to come. But for now, don't mess around with it. Don't waste that battery. Use it for what it's meant for on those Fridays, and we'll get to work with it. They did a great job of bringing them back today.
Yeah.
We talked about that. I talked about that with Rhonda. I've talked about that with Brenda. We have a plan if there's any issues with that kind of moving forward. But, they did a really good job. I think we were down to like 9 at the end of the day that hadn't returned them out of 485. And so, I mean, elementary kids, I mean, that's awesome. We've talked a little bit about, we are also working with our Galaxy staff and helping them on those Fridays kind of get up to speed with how does the system work. They're putting in a lot of extra time too with our students, particularly on Fridays, on our asynchronous Fridays. And so we'll be back down there this Friday, helping that staff kind of get up to speed so that they can work with kids that come to them. And we'll work with that program to make sure that those kids get the support that they need from those teachers. So, and those paras, that's an important piece. And as we go through, again, we're making changes that are based on kind of the feedback that we get from the teachers, the kids, the families as we kind of move through this process. So that's what I got. All right. Are we ready for assessment results?
So can we move on? Is that okay, Amy? Rest of the board?
Yeah, I'm looking around. I think, we're going to transition out of distance learning topic and move
we know
on
how to
into
use it now.
Well, I'd like to get through the presentation, so if we do have time at the end, we can just talk about anything else that we want to talk about. So the assessment data. First of all, we're pretty fortunate and I don't always make things look all rosy for Rockford. I remember the first time you met me, I talked about smoking in the bathrooms. So I'm not that person that makes everything all Pollyanny. But we are fortunate to have actually completed fall assessments. And I say that because statewide, well, nationwide, but statewide for sure, there were a lot of districts that were unable to even do the fall assessments at any grade level because many of them were distance learning. I mean, just that in itself. And then for districts that were similar to ours, again, just many districts just didn't get it done. So we're real fortunate that not only were we able to get our fall assessments in, but Kevin will talk about it in a little bit here. We assess kids K-10, I think, Kevin, correct? So real fortunate that we are able to do that. And I say that not knowing, kind of going back to Brady's point, we don't know what the spring is going to bring. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to do some post-assessments in the spring, but if we're all distance learning K-12, we don't know where the virus is going to head. I mean, we just don't know. At this point, MCAs are still on the calendar, and I've been told that it's still on our calendar at the state level because it's on the calendar at the federal level. And so the state is required to provide, their statewide assessments because the federal government is requiring it. So at this point, MCAs are still on the table. But other things have also been canceled. The December ACT and SATs have been canceled at this point. So again, I know Kevin's going to talk about the assessment data, but I just feel real fortunate that we have some baseline data
So whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it is what it is at this point. So sorry, Kevin.
It's not. It actually is better than I had expected, to be honest with you. And on top of that, I would add, Rhonda, that I do have updates from the MCAs. All of our MCA training for DACs, District Assessment Coordinators, that was scheduled in December, have been pushed back to February, which is kind of interesting. So that essentially, I think I mentioned that they're looking at a method to give the MCAs remotely. Oof, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. If that's what they do, that's what we'll do, and we'll go with that. You know, we'll get the training from them, and we'll do what we got to do for that. So, with that being said, like Rhonda said, we did have the opportunity to take some baseline data for all of our K-10 students and a couple of students in 11th grade also. And we got to be a little bit careful about sharing our FastBridge and assessment results. Again, if there's a subset, we didn't break it down into subsets because we don't have subsets that are more than 20 for the most part. So it's pretty high level data at this point, or entire grade levels. But we, obviously we can break it down a little bit more from my end as we kind of go through. But this is kind of a high level overview. We are actually starting the second round of winter assessments for Ream students. Some of the classes have been able to get in there. We're making plans on getting our distance learning kids either invite them into the media center at the high school, or to see if we can somehow use the Commons. I'm sorry, use the RCC. I've got to call into Melissa again. We used the RCC the beginning of the year for our distance learning students, brought them in small groups, and did the fast assessments in person. And we're looking to do that again for winter for our distance learning students. We'll see if we can pull that off. And after winter break, we really should be able to wrap up our fast testing for Reams for sure. Middle school is still looking at after winter break testing. Same thing with the high school with the STAR stuff. So that's going to be pushed off a little bit, and they're already in distance learning. So we're looking to see if there is some type of an option. There is a fast option. I'm not real excited about it, and I can tell you that other assessment coordinators around the state are not real excited about trying to do fast assessments at a distance with hundreds of kids. It's not going to work. I'm sorry. So we'll see. We'll see how that all works out. But while we've got our kids in school, though, we are in the testing window for winter assessment for Reams, and so they've moved ahead with that, like I said. And hopefully by the time we break for winter break, we'll have all of our in-school students done, and we'll have a good start on our distance learning students. So I know Amanda put some graphs in here. We went back through and I created some other spreadsheets that I might pull up and present to it. It's just a little easier look, but go ahead and let's see what you got here, Amanda. Go on to that next screen and, oh, okay. I see what you're doing here. Okay. Yes, actually this is what I wanted to show. Thank you. Good. So did you get a preview of this? I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. And this has literally been updated as of today. So if you didn't get a chance to jump in there, we were able to pull up a little bit more of that early learning piece on this. Boy, I'm really struggling to see this on my screen here, Amanda. I'm sorry, it's pretty small.
Amanda, can you magnify that a little bit?
It's broken down by grade level, AIM math, math, reading, early math, early reading. The early math and the early reading are more like a CBM for our kindergarten students. It takes a look at some like a kind of a comprehensive look at some very specific measures as they go through. Our kindergartners don't take the A reading assessment that starts in first grade up through fourth grade as we kind of move through here. So you can kind of see the percentages as we go through. Typically, you'll see that early on your K1 students are a little bit behind. And then when we hit third grade, you see that proficiency really jumping up. And I don't know if anybody else has heard this about nationwide data. We're actually kind of inversely kind of going against what we're seeing in the nation. Nationwide math numbers were down real low after last spring, and the testing results came back that the kids were really behind. And for some reason, at least on this baseline, all the way through our grade levels, our math numbers were up. And I don't want to say that our reading numbers were down, but they were lower than our math numbers. And what they were seeing across the nation is that for the most part, reading scores were up above math scores across the nation. So it's kind of an interesting little flip we've got going on here. And I don't know let's give it credit to the teachers. I think they did a nice job last spring and this fall. And I guess we're up to speed with where we need to be. Obviously, we want to see greater levels of proficiency, but
I have a speculation, and that is we have such a strong music program, and there is a correlation between music and math. I was a math teacher, and there's a direct correlation between music and math. So could be that we start our elementary kids out in a arts magnet program.
I like it.
On music.
That works for us.
And I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, hey, Kevin, I'm going to ask the Eric Gordy question.
Okay.
Cohort. So you said that you were pleased with, you see he's laughing. So you were pleased with kind of at least this data, obviously how we were in the spring was a very different learning model than we, ever anticipated. Did you see any worrisome cohort-based shifts, where you saw a shift from, kids that were in second grade last year and now are in, like, when you follow them along, did you see any dips that are concerning, or did the cohorts kind of hold their own?
They held their own. I guess the one piece that and I don't want to say it's worrisome would be in the reading area with our ninth graders, to be honest with you. That was the one piece that kind of stood out to me. Amanda, if you can go to that tab and scroll to the Reading Star assessment. And again, that can be part of the testing, a new test for kids. They came out of, they're transitioning from 8th grade to 9th grade. That's a tough transition. And now we're giving them a test right away as they come into the high school. So I think we got to be a little bit careful. It is a data point. It's not the be all end all data point. It'll be interesting to see if we can get these kids back in here to do that winter assessment to kind of see if where that changes. But of any of them, I would say that was one area that I was a little bit concerned about there. The 64.55% proficiency seemed a little bit out of it, and it can also be how serious the kids take the test, though, at that age level too. That can play a role in where they're at, and the fact that we had some of these kids were distance learning kids that we had come in. There's a lot of factors. You got to see more than just that. But if you're going to ask me, that would be the one area of concern that I would have. So that is a piece that we can kind of think about and talk about at the high school as we kind of move forward. Yeah.
That was a good question, Amy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Eric.
Can you click on the district summary then, Amanda? Thank you. So district totals, like we said, proficiency levels for all kids in math and reading, 78 to 73%. If you think about what our MCA scores kind of come out at, that's actually a little bit above where our MCA scores have been in the past. And I don't know that I've ever pulled it out district-wide, what our proficiencies are, and it doesn't. We've got more. Oh, sorry, my dog's barking. Welcome to distance learning and Google Meets. So, if you look at our scores here, it's pretty. I think it's really good after what we went through last year. To be honest with you, just kind of thinking about where we're at and where we've gone. So, sorry, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna push Remy out here.
Any other questions that maybe I can answer?
No, so wait.
Eric,
Sorry.
Eric raising his physical hand.
Yeah, so
Remy wanted to join. I apologize, sir.
should let him come in. Should
I
let him
know.
come in, or her,
She.
sorry.
She.
There
Yeah.
we go. I always need that fuzzy look. So I agree with you 100% that finding that motivation to take these assessments is tough, especially when I think what I recall my high schooler took it like the day before they were going distance, right? So that motivation is difficult.
It's tough.
Absolutely. I will say though that if you look at historical MCAs as we go apples to apples following that 9th grade backwards, that's that trend that you notice with that cohort of kids, right?
Yeah.
And I'll wait until you get into your goal sheet before I ask some other questions, but I will. Hopefully all of these data is great, right? I love it, but I want to. Hopefully we figure out what we're going to do with it, right? What are we doing with it as a district, right? I mean, how are we helping these kids? What interventions and what strategies are put in place, now, right? It's hard because we're distance, right? We don't have physical capacity to do that all the time. But if I recall, we do have the ability to bring targeted kids in periodically for additional help if necessary, right?
And that is happening. Yep.
That
is part of the plan. Yep.
That is happening, Eric. And it's balancing that with our kids are struggling right now. And it's not interesting. It's starting to manifest itself outward that we can start. I mean, we all knew that this was going to be hard for our kids, but now it's starting to bubble up where there's more referrals, mental health referrals, and not just in Rockford, but across the state. I don't even want to say some of the things that are happening, but there's suicide attempts, there's mental health issues, and we're starting to see that. Our kids are starting to crash and burn a little bit because of just what they're dealing with right now. And so as much as, testing, curriculum, totally important. I get it. But it's also Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of feeling safe and belonging to something. I mean, when school was all you had, the social part of school, because maybe you weren't a strong student, and you've removed that. I just kind of keep bringing us back to the fact that our kids are struggling right now, and I know the counselors and the teachers are focusing on making sure that the well-being of our students is a priority, as well as the curriculum. And I'm not downplaying the curriculum because, of course, that's our mission. But it's making sure those other needs are met also.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about how are we going to approach the social emotional learning aspect of all of our kids now, especially now that they've gone full on distance learning at secondary, and how do we support the kids as we move forward, and so when we talk about setting goals and pushing that forward, that's a big part of it, ahead of a lot of the other pieces too. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that as just a comment. Just being in healthcare, 'cause that's the perspective I get to bring to this board. Is I appreciate ensuring that the social emotional is a, and I know educators do as well. But just really thinking about that as we think about our strategy, because the other thing that I worry about are kids that might be showing proficiency on our test scores right now, right? Like they look like they're good. But as the pressures, of being remote, even if they're a high academic achiever, traditionally learning in a different environment and not having that collegiality within their classroom can bring forth other manifestations as well. And so, I think having that holistic approach to education, which I know you are, and test scores are one marker, that show, some kids that we know might be struggling right now in this moment. And I think what I'm hearing you say, Rhonda, is that you also have your eye out for those that, based on this test score, look like they're doing pretty good right now at this pulse check, if you will. But, in this new learning environment and in the social side of it and the, community side of it may struggle, and we just don't see that yet. So I appreciate, your attention to that too, as we kind of walk through this year together. So thanks. So it's, thanks for elevating that.
Yeah, and to so go ahead, Rhonda.
Well, no, I was just two comments on that. It's also the staff. I mean, our staff has, when we talk about the mental health and the well-being of, I'm talking about it as an organization, not just the students, because our staff need that attention also. And again, it's a balance between delivering the curriculum, holding kids accountable. Yes, there's test scores, but then making sure our staff understand that it's not all in that lane. In other words, we want them to take time to check on our kids and to make sure those social emotional needs are met. And if it's a matter of shifting a little bit of time on a given day to a different activity that's going to encourage and strengthen that sense of belonging, then that's what we have to do. And I've given our teachers permission to do that, because they need to do that. And not just for their kids, but for themselves, to kind of take that monkey off of their back, because they know and see the needs that the kids are having. But we don't want it to be so much that, yeah, I see the needs of my kids, but test. And so it is a balancing act in terms of advancing through the curriculum while maintaining that the social, by fostering and supporting the social emotional needs of our kids.
Thanks.
That's number one. And then the second thing I was going to say, because you had mentioned some of our high flyers, having spent over a decade in Wayzata, one of the things that I noticed is that those are the kids, those high flyer kids, in times like this, when we've kind of had to take the spotlight off of the SAT, the ACT, top 10, number one in your class, that so many of our kids strive for their entire, career, their school career, to have the spotlight taken from that. Those are the kids that really struggle, because that has been their identity all of their life, is to strive to be that number one or that top 10, or to get that score in that ACT to apply for that college of choice. And now that ball has been moved. And so those are the kids that I really worry about, because those are the kids that will end up in a 24-hour hold, that will end up in a mental health facility, that will have that suicide attempt, because they don't see anything else, because their life has been so focused on that outcome. So it's totally a balancing act, but our teachers have been doing an amazing job. I tell you, we talk about heroes. Our teachers are leaning in, and it's really been quite fascinating to watch them really take on what they're taking on. And again, leaning into it. Yeah, do we have our family disputes? Of course. But at the end, they show up and they take care of our kids. So.
Thanks, Rhonda. Beth, you had your hand up and then you put it down. So do you still have your hand up?
And I'm just going to not gently segue us back. I honor everything what you've just said about social emotional. That's where we need to start, Rhonda. I think that's where. Did you guys know that only 45 schools in the whole state are still in person every day? So it lets you know that we are among others that are going through the same thing as us. This is a quick question back to what you were sharing earlier, Kevin. And I think this helps with the social emotional because students want to see that they're also growing and learning. And so I'm wondering if you also, and I don't know, but I remember that at one point FAST recommended collecting CBM data for the middle of first grade through 8th grade. And that's a data point that might move faster than an A rating. Did they collect that information also? Okay.
2nd through 4th grade
Okay.
did, well, yeah, okay, they did. It's hard to share because it doesn't translate well to this type of graph, because what it does is it looks at like one of those 4 areas. You might see proficiency, but you might have proficiency in 3 of the 4 areas, and then have that one area where a specific kid isn't doing well. And so the answer is yes, they actually did pull that.
Okay.
That they have not done that at the 5th through 8th grade level.
Well, and
you know what?
I
can't say that for sure. I guess I am not aware if they have done that at the 5th grade level, and I don't believe they have. I would have to check on that. So that's a good question. I'll have to follow up on that.
Well, and at the secondary level, that might be only for the kids that are proficient on A rating. You wouldn't have to give it to everybody.
Yeah.
But I just think that we want to show movement and we want to show kids what they're learning. And those minute data points can help students and instruction. So I just wondered, because it's okay if it wasn't on your graph, but I just think we have to look for those small steps forward and not always look at that big umbrella assessment, because sometimes it's hard to move real big steps, but we can take those baby steps along the way.
Yeah, and I can tell you that our title teachers are definitely using CBMs for math and using it for math and there we go. Sorry, I lost it there for a second. Using it for math and reading. Somebody just called me on my phone, so I had to
You're a busy guy.
Yeah,
well,
we got a little bit going here.
And I think that's where you'll see that more of that those improvements and a little bit more refined data point, and to focus on both the big picture and the small picture. So thank you.
And going back to Eric's point though, that you originally made, Eric, one of the things that I've been finding out is I've kind of got on my journey with data, is that what I'm hearing is that a lot of school districts are very data rich, but analysis poor. And we hear that a lot. One of the things that we've tried to do as a district is get involved with a group called CARI out of the University of Minnesota, and we are a member of that particular group as we move forward. So that's been very helpful for me, and just connecting with that group over the last couple of years here. We are officially a part of that now, starting this school year. So yes. If you want to keep moving then, Amanda, I think we got a couple other little pieces here. Oh, okay. Staff development. All right.
So this is the third. What time is it? Oh, 7:30. Nice.
We're doing well.
So staff development. I told McCown, I was like, Kevin, I gotta say something. I'm really grateful for having to dig into the staff development process. I didn't have my head wrapped around it at the beginning of the school year, admittedly so. But over the past, I want to say month, I really had the opportunity to, find out what have we done in the past? How did it work last year? How, talk to me about the process. And really was able to find out some things that we needed to tighten up, some tentacles that weren't fully developed. So I really appreciated the opportunity to really get my head around the professional development process. I know there were some things that Kevin wasn't aware of. And so really it resulted in some rich conversations. And so really appreciate that. But I'll have Kevin talk a little bit about what we're doing and moving forward in terms of engaging our teachers and what we're doing at the building level. So yeah.
Yeah, and like Rhonda said, as we dug into the history of staff development, and yeah, it was interesting to kind of peel back the onion, so to speak, and see what was there, and learning more about where the budget had been and how it's been used in the past. So starting with that, we had a nice subcommittee meeting with a few of our teachers to kind of roll out a process, and we've been getting feedback from our I call them the A team. Well, they call themselves the A team. Our advisor team for the PLCs. We've had some feedback from the business office. One of the other things that we've kind of figured out too is that we need to kind of digitize our process, particularly now that our staff is in, most of our staff is in distance learning and they are in and out of the buildings. And so we're working on digitizing that process. I'm working with the business office on that. We pulled Erin Rocker into our process here, and she got she dipped her toes in there and and I keep teasing her, but she's my thought partner on this, and so she'll appreciate that I mentioned that. And so what we did is we went back to something that I know is familiar with a lot of folks in Rockford, is the Plan, Do, Study, Act, but we kind of put a new twist on it for staff development process as we went through. And what Rhonda asked me to do is to take all of the bits and pieces, so to speak, and pull it all together and try to align it in a little different way. And what it did was it kind of revealed some of the parts of the budget that I was not aware of or was not allowed to see previously. And so it kind of helped bring it all together. And as we've gone through, and again, like I said, we're still working on the process, but we've got some really good feedback with the new process that we put forward. Again, you can see there, we identify that goal and the need, we implement those strategies, evaluate, and then hopefully we can get to that presentation goal at a staff meeting or at a PLC. What you'll see in staff development and professional development is frequently number 4 is a tricky one. People like to go and as a teacher, sometimes sharing it out is a little bit more difficult. And so what we need to do is combine both our staff development process and our PLC process. And I think we've made some good leaps over the past 3 years in how that can go about. Again, looking back at some of the history of our PLC process, we can look at some of the improvements that we made, particularly in the last 3 years with our PLCs. And then on top of that, you've got this whole juggernaut called IB, which really opened up for the other 2 buildings some opportunities here in the last year that I can kind of point out as we move forward. So if you'll go to the next slide, please, Amanda. Here is kind of the overall look at this particular plan. What we looked at was kind of the alignment of all the different goals and needs that you might see, and you might have seen this before, but really when you break it down there, we do have building goals, QComp individual goals. So those building and QComp goals kind of go together. World's best workforce, A&I goals. We do have some relicensure stuff there. There is a philosophical conversation to have with relicensure that we can talk about. And then any district initiatives, and some of the district initiatives that we've talked about obviously is going one-to-one. That's going to be huge as we move forward. So if I back it up, there are some districts that will cover all relicensure. One of the big areas that's going to be difficult to cover from a school district perspective would be cultural competency, just because of the sheer number of hours that are needed. But I think it's something that we need to look into for relicensure. The requirement is between 5 and 8 hours. And typically that's done in a sitting or over a number of days. So I think that's an area that we could work on breaking that down over the course of a year or 2 as we kind of move forward. So we'll come back around to that. I think that's a discussion that we got to continue to move forward to as we go through.
Hey, Kevin, sorry to interrupt on that one, but just one of the alignment questions that I would ask, and you don't have to answer this, but just naturally, I'd be curious to think through like how Northwest Suburban, being a part of the integration district could be useful. right, in supporting that curriculum? And I don't know the answer, but that would just be something I would lift up from a
Yeah.
alignment perspective.
And we talk about that too. I sit on the multi-district collaborative committee, and we talk about that all the time. That falls under A&I. And I can tell you that Northwest Suburban does not offer that as a relicensure credit, but they do offer culturally responsive classroom materials. They haven't built it out yet to the point where we could send a teacher to them to get relicensed. So,
Okay.
I haven't heard that they are necessarily working on that process, but their main goal is integration. Obviously, that is the purpose, and so obviously we work directly with them. I can tell you though that we do get a lot of good information from some of the bigger districts that are involved. I mean, Anoka, Hennepin, and Osseo are great resources for us to kind of look at and as we move forward. It is a good organization for our guidance. So we redeveloped the staff development application. It is now a Google form that goes out to teachers, and it asks them to look at what need are they looking at, and then what funding source are they looking from. And so there's really three potential funding sources, being staff development. Potentially they could pull for individual goals from QComp, and I got to go back and dig back and look to see if the A&I budget might be better used for building goals and bigger achievement and integration things than individual goals, but it is a potential funding source as we move forward. Then we asked the teachers to implement what they've learned, and really what we talked about with the teachers is that professional development and staff development is really an opportunity to change behavior. And that behavior change comes through a change in your practice that you get when you go to that professional development. And that behavior change then impacts our students as we go through. So I always talk about the fact that, investing in staff development is really investing in our students as we kind of move forward. And we really want the buildings to identify the needs that they have. And so I think this process that we've mapped out here with our subcommittee will allow us to do that. The other thing you got to remember too is that the staff development process isn't just the teachers. And so I have also had subcommittee meetings with buildings and grounds, and I've also had subcommittee meetings with, I still need to work a little bit more with John and IT, and then even my own department in teaching and learning, although, which includes the clerical staff. And so we have done some work with our clerical staff this year on a staff development. I know Jim is going to have some requests to bring to our larger staff development meeting. And obviously the teachers will have requests from all three of those buildings also. And so as you look at it, you got to remember staff development includes all of our entities as we kind of move forward. And we built that into the process too. So do a little analysis, and then we report our findings back to our PLCs. Hopefully that's what I'm going to push for. In some cases, it is appropriate to bring it to the buildings, and it might even be appropriate to bring it district-wide, depending on the particular staff development. So, Amanda, can you go to the next slide? So let me.
This is in the board packet. This might be
okay.
difficult to try to.
Yeah, this is a little bit. But yeah, I think this went out on the board packet as a PDF.
Yeah.
I saw it as a PDF earlier. So, but this is actually this is kind of the culmination of the district goals. And if you take a peek at this is a pretty important piece here. I can tell you that I've got to put a piece back for achievement and integration that essentially is going to say we were not able to measure for our goals. And that's a kind of a statewide technique that's kind of going out right now. We talk about that quite a bit, and there's actually a check mark on the achievement and integration and world's best workforce report that says was not able to measure that for this year. That happened because of the lack of MCA data from last spring. And so just note that some of the goals that are on here do still reflect the fact that they're asking for MCA data from last year. But if you kind of roll across there, you're really kind of seeing what the buildings have identified. You're seeing that, again, there's that juggernaut IB implementation. That comes with its own staff development funding. which opened up some of the staff development funding for the other two buildings, which is kind of a nice benefit. You'll see when we kind of parsed out the initial funding that the high school looks like they've got less. However, they've got significantly more money through the IB grant for staff development. Any thoughts about the goal sheet here? Anything that you see? Eric.
If Jessica wants to go first, she can go first. I saw her picking her fingers up there. All right, so I don't know, Rhonda or Kevin, who does the building goals, but it seems like the second point of all of those have already been accomplished with your initial testing of your data. So
yep.
Hopefully they'll be revisited and tuned a touch.
And I can tell you that we worked directly with our QComp state representatives about putting this in. And if you see the last line in all of those goals, because we moved away from MCA to fast and in-house testing, they recommended that we start at a fairly low number, something that's reasonable and that we can reach, and that we call it a baseline year, because it's the first year that we've used these tests for those PLC, for the QComp building goals. And so that's why it looks like it looks. And you're absolutely right.
And I'll agree with that, Kevin, but I will say it's extremely difficult to create a goal on something that you've never used before when you're just collecting data. Just saying, right? I mean, you're throwing darts and just guessing at this and hoping something works. My other question is, you have on all of these in your world's best workforce, the closing the achievement gap. I'm a really big proponent of SMART goals and having them written out properly with something attainable and measurable. Do we have anything written down as to what we're doing and how we are addressing those gaps? Because just saying we're closing it, awesome, but what are we actually doing and how are we measuring this?
And the reason why they're written out like that, Eric, is because that is actually language from the state of Minnesota. Those are not the SMART goals, and that's what it is. I'm
just asking if we have.
I'm just telling you that's where that particular piece came from. And so each building has to kind of identify how they're going to close that achievement gap through a SMART goal. But we also do have district-wide goals. And I'm sorry, I don't have that right in front of me.
And do we have those?
Yeah. Yep.
We have those SMART goals created by the building with actual.
It's more of a district-wide. We don't have to do it building by building, but I put them in there building by building as kind of a way to do exactly what you just asked for. Is how the one thing that kind of came out of this for me, particularly with World's Best Workforce, is that there's a lot of teachers that are not aware that is a district-wide initiative. And so if they're, as people have talked a little bit more about what roads they want to go down to around cultural competency and culturally responsive classrooms, I wanted to put something in this format that could give them something to work towards a kind of a generic goal, if that makes sense. I didn't want to specify rate what it was, but it does fall under World's Best Workforce. And what I've been trying to kind of articulate to the teachers that I've talked to and to the administrators is that, as I think back over the last, 2.5 years of what we've looked at for staff development requests, I can't think of any that would not have fallen somewhere on this. And so, I mean, if you look at this is a wide range of different goals and categories, but it hits almost everything, every piece that's possible. So
to that, Kevin, have we created, do we have the strategies identified and metrics to measure, and don't take this the wrong way, closing the achievement gap this year with our distance learning might happen because everyone might just go like this, right? I'm just saying, right? Either the top is going to come down or the bottom is going to go for one of the two, right? So it may close a little bit regardless, maybe, but have we do we have specific measures that and strategies that we're utilizing that have been developed across the district, or is that something that's still in formation?
And the answer is, I would say yes and no. Yes, have we put goals out there? Absolutely, and you can kind of see some of it in the A&I goals. Achievement and integration and world's best workforce kind of go hand in hand. I don't know if you know this or not, but when you report back to the state, world's best workforce and achievement and integration go back on the same form, because not every district has to do an A&I process because they're not part of an integration district. And so the world's best workforce, they tried to combine these two reports. And so some of the world's best workforce goals are the proficiency rates for students that are real specific. What I would argue, though, is that they're pretty generic at this point. And I would like to see a more specified SMART goal around that process. And I think the staff development process will allow us to kind of dig into that at a little deeper level.
So then the answer to that is, so the no part of that is no, we don't have any identified strategies or metrics to measure our success in that, besides looking at our MCA data that possibly comes back.
The answer is we do, though. One of the things that we talked about last year was the use of Envoy. One of the pieces that we did that we still want to look at is, and that may not be necessarily about closing the achievement gap, but it does work towards culturally responsive classrooms and allowing students to be treated all the same exact way in a classroom, regardless of more based on the situation than based on the student. To your point, though, regarding MCA data, you are correct with that, though. But there are other methods and other pieces to that world's best workforce that we could dig into a little bit deeper.
In a unique year, given the fact that we had to ramp into distance learning as much as we possibly did, but it's still work to do, right? To be able to identify those things that
Absolutely.
Rockford needs to do to make us less of a gap, make no gap, right? Fill that thing in. So.
Well, and to your point, Eric, this is statewide. This has been something that's been pushed statewide,
But we have to do this, right? I mean,
yes,
I don't
we
care
do.
about the state. Our district needs to take care of this, right? We've talked about how our Hispanics and our Black and Brown students have historically achieved much lower than their same cohort white students. And this is a report that has come to us 2 years in a row, and I'm hopeful in the future, Rhonda, we're able to come together as a district and actually address those and have some specific guides and goals and strategies for our entire district to utilize. That's what I'm hopeful for.
Absolutely. Eric, I'm there with you, because when how can I say this? When I look at a community like Rockford, well, first of all, in terms of the achievement gap, if somebody had the answer, we'd all be doing it. I mean, we're all struggling with the achievement gap. But, as Amy likes to say, when I look at a community like Rockford, if there is any, to your point, Eric, if there is any community that can really start chipping away and closing that gap, Rockford's that community, because it's manageable. It's manageable. We know our students are finite. We're not talking thousands and thousands across, 43 elementary schools. It's manageable. And so I'm very hopeful and optimistic that we can do exactly what you're wanting us to do, and that is identify our kids who are achieving below their ability level and really targeting them and closing that achievement gap. Rockford it's doable. It's doable because of our size. It's doable because of our desire. And I really truly believe that the staff in this school district is going to stand up and take on that challenge. That's just what I'm going to say about that. I'm confident with that. I feel that to be true.
And I'm hopeful with the strategic plan and our ability to focus in on making things better. We'll be able to also put some resources in to help train our people on how to write really good goals, not only from the leadership level, but all the way down to our staff.
Sure.
Right now, it almost feels like we were thrown into the deep end of the pool and we just learned how to swim. And we're working really, really hard and we're staying above water. So we're doing it, but it's like, we can't. It's doing exactly what you just said over the next several months, year, becoming more efficient and not having to, I'm going to say, exert so much energy just to stay above water, that we're going to actually, improve our form, if you will. I truly believe that Rockford Area School is going to be that school district that can really show significant chipping away at the gap in the achievement gap. I just believe that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Rhonda, you're singing my song. So first of all, I want to say thank you for this opportunity tonight, because this is how we move down in that direction. So thank you.
We're trying.
Thank you. Yes. And thank you for this, because this is the first step. And thank you, Kevin, for putting this all together. This is the first step. We might not always like what we're looking at, but we're taking the first step. And that's why I asked about CBM. It's really hard to write a goal, a SMART goal for a big A reading or a big STAR test. You can write a SMART goal for those smaller tests that we can look at. And that's why the step was so important. And then the teachers have the passion, the leaders have the passion as leaders, learning, like Eric said, to look at the data, disaggregate the data, and build goals. The teachers need that leadership. They need that direction to go because they're drowning. And so you are taking the first step to help them use all the data we collect, and then that all ties into staff development. So the first step is today, and it's moving forward. So thank you very much. That as a leader of the district, Rhonda, you just said exactly how I feel in my heart. This is what needs to be done, and you will get the teachers there. So thank you.
Well, we're trying, Beth. And I don't want to rehash everything. It's just these are such challenging times, and there's so many balls in the air right now that I appreciate you acknowledging it being a first step, because it's like a juggler. You got all these balls, and you gotta tap that one and get that one back up there.
I know. It's
back in play.
And let's just see what balls are still in existence when all this is over. I mean, Masiko is all online now, so I'm there with you. Like, we're just trying to keep afloat.
Yeah, the other thing that I think, going back to something Kevin said way earlier about the 3 days last week, or now that's been 2 weeks ago. Time is going way too fast.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks ago, is if you remember our calendar this year, because of calendar creep, this year and next year, we have very minimal professional development during the school year. So that's just one more piece. And not that on a regular year, there was a lot of staff development during a school year, but these next 2 years, it's even less. If you remember when we adopted the calendar, because nobody wanted to start before Labor Day and nobody wanted to go into the second week of June. So we tightened it up. I think we only have one late start day. And so it's also finding the time to do what we need to do. So it's having all those balls in the air and just tapping that one back up and just keeping everything in play until we have a chance to just more time. So we're working on it.
Jessica.
Thank you, Beth, for that.
So Eric pretty much covered everything that I was going to ask about. But I know that this was the goals and stuff were put together with the state. when I participate in Q Comp, we always revisit our goals mid-year, and if things need to be changed because we went from our data that we collected in the fall, created our goal, and met midway through the year. And if we needed to adjust that goal because maybe those kids have already met those goals, maybe we need to make it a little bit tougher or something, we did that. So I was just curious. I'm looking at it going, I feel like we've met all three of those goals already. And I'm just curious, are we looking at adjusting that or not? Because I feel like that it's to just give that purpose, that drive or whatever to our staff, our teachers. We surpassed all of those goals by a ton. So is there a way to change that up a little bit to kind of give them something to work towards?
If you're talking about like the building level goals, again, created directly, I can just tell you what I know. They were developed with the principal and the AE team advisors, and again, as a baseline year. Having not used these measures in the past, and that goes towards another conversation that I'm having with our A team, is this the type of building goal that they want to continue to provide? QComp can look very different than what it looks like right now, and I've brought that up several times with the QComp group. This is the direction that they want to go. We've been making small incremental steps in how we change and how we work in our PLCs. This is a way to do it. There's other ways to go about it. And it's a very flexible system, QComp is. I've seen some radically different systems. I would say, though, that this is probably the most common way to go about it. Can we adjust the goals? Sure, I think we can adjust the goals if we need. I don't know if I'm going to get a whole lot of traction from our leaders and the buildings, particularly during distance learning, to change those goals. I'm a little concerned with that as we kind of move forward. So,
and Jessica, yeah, in terms of the building goal, that 60% because of the baseline, it's the overall building goal though is still literacy and read by 3. So I do know that looking at some of the conversations that the elementary teachers have had, and I'm not in that building on a regular basis, that's what they're looking to do, is to go to training to improve reading instruction. That's what that's the goal, is to close that gap, because we know all of our kids are not reading at the 3rd grade level by 3rd grade. So even though that building goal, I hear what you're saying, and I understand why you're saying that, but that's not that. Yeah. It's not that goal's complete. Like by far, we have a gap. And so then it's what does it take? Yes, it's the curriculum, but it's also the feeling of again, it's belonging. It's making sure with distance learning, kids have an appropriate setting. It's all of that. Yeah. And I'm not telling you things that you don't know. Of course you know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's a work in progress. We're working on it. It was a fast 3 weeks. It's actually one of the reasons why I led with the way I led this whole conversation, because I just knew that, no, this is not a full product. But again, there were other things in these past 3 weeks that had to be priorities, and not that this is not a priority, but we're moving this process forward. And yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but we're in a much better place now than we were 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to get better.
Thanks for that, Rhonda. And I do think, obviously this year is so different because we are operating amidst a global pandemic of small things. Each time you say that out loud, it's like, wow, really? Yes, it's true. With that being said, though, I think one of the things that, if we were to wipe that out, right, if we weren't in this situation where we're, dealing with alternative learning models and, all of our current reality, if we were to fast forward, once we're out of that, I do believe, and I appreciate Eric kind of mentioning it in his statement earlier, as we look towards our strategic planning process from a district, I think ensuring that there is a mechanism where the board can have the appropriate level, altitude, line of sight to performance, to, gaps and those sort of things, with SMART goals and with all of those sort of things, regardless of what we have to file for world's best workforce and all of that, but really from a district perspective, making sure that we're progressing towards goal. And Rhonda, you just drew a line in the sand, like just now that Beth just gave you like a virtual high five for, that we are going to close this gap. So, as we think about that, then from a board perspective, I think where we look for, or I can speak for myself, look forward to partnership on is how can we best align around that? How can we best support that mission, to make sure that all students succeed in our district equally? And, again, pandemic aside, knowing that we've got all of these balls in the air and we are just like Maslow's right now. But as we flip, beyond that, as we look into our strategic planning process, ensuring that we have a really good way to integrate this into that, I think it'll be so powerful. It'll be so good. And then we'll continue to be aligning around the same things and just having our foot on the gas there. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on all of it. I get where we are now. We have to stay in the moment, right? And embrace the moment that we're in and, kind of position for the future. And our planning process should be very useful in that.
Yeah. I'm going to even take it one step further. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but if ideally, I see that if a student who's with us from preschool on, there is no reason why there should be a gap. I mean, that to me is the ultimate, end goal, is that when you come to Rockford area schools as a preschooler or a kindergartner, you are reading at grade level by 3rd grade, by 5th grade, by 7th grade, by 10th grade. Because we, that 10th grade reading level is kind of where we, I don't want to say measure out, but that, to me, that's the end game. And then any other student who moves into our district who is below grade level, now we need to do some targeted services. But if you're with us from kindergarten on, that's our goal, is to not have a gap. You started with us. And so right now we have to work on closing the gap. And yeah, employing those strategies starting at preschool. But yeah, if you're with us from kindergarten, preschool on, shouldn't strive to not have a gap at all. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're going to work on it.
Mm-hmm. All right. I see Beth has her hand up before we move on to this last piece. So Beth, go ahead. Yep.
Just a quick clarification. I'm wondering, so the building goals are really to hopefully that the teachers get that Q comp money? Is that why? And so that's why they're maybe, and let's give the teachers a bone this year. They deserve it. I'm not going to fixate on that. Where I see some area, and I think that's what Eric was looking at, was more that world's best workforce, those goals, because I don't want to mess with teachers' Q comp money. You know what? It's that we do have to have some SMART goals embedded and really have some rigor, and they might not get their building goal every year. That's why those individual goals are so important. So I was just thinking about it. I think that helps me understand why that baseline is so low, because it's the Q comp goal. And so where I'm looking at that closed achievement gap, that's where we could have some different, more really rigorous SMART goals for kind of the district direction and not necessarily penalize teachers as much, you know, for not getting their Q comp. Just a thought.
Thanks, Beth.
Okay.
All right.
All right, next slide, Amanda.
Oh,
And
maybe this last slide. Yeah.
this is it. All right.
I think
So, and just kind of looking at staff development funding for the buildings. We talked about this last summer, kind of how we could break it down a little bit more into building funding, and these are just the numbers that we're going to start with again, to see if this makes sense. This is based on what our expenditures were last year for each building. What we talked about again, the high school is a little bit lower because of the extra IB funding, and so what we've talked about with Mr. Bernard in particular is using a lot of the high school money for social emotional and some of the pieces that might not fit under the IB grant. There are still some pieces that don't necessarily fit. So that's what we're looking at. And then for the district-wide pieces too, I'm there to help with buildings and grounds, IT. So it's not all about just the teachers. Like we said, staff development includes all those other groups too. Rhonda, you were going to say something?
Well, just as it relates to the budget. So one of the things, I don't think we ever talked in the beginning, Kevin, about the structure of that subcommittee. So what we did is we have identified 2 individuals in each building that are going to be part of the staff development committee for that building, because we really want the teachers to kind of take ownership of not just their goals, but their professional development surrounding those goals. You always learn, I mean, you know, you've been to numerous PDs, that if it's something that you find that you're interested in, that's going to help, you know, the reading level of the kids in your classroom, you're more apt to engage with it and use whatever you, the training that you participate in. And so by having the representatives, from, again, 2 from each building, and providing them with their budget on the front end, now they can have more robust conversation. It's like, well, we don't know if we can do that. No, you can do that. Like be positive about what they can and have the ability to do and promote for themselves as they look for those professional development opportunities for their students. So I don't know if we said that in the beginning, Kevin, about.
No, I don't think we did talk about that. No. Beth, you had a question.
I lowered it because I was going to raise it again. So this is great to see this. Do we have like a total amount? Because it used to be 2%, but I don't know if that's the case still, that we get 2%. So kind of is that, if you add all that up, is that the whole pot?
No, and Rhonda has asked me to work on that budget so that we have a little bit more detail in that. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Kevin or Rhonda on this topic tonight?
Oh, thanks, Amanda, for managing the slideshow.
Yeah,
thank you.
That was huge. Thank you.
So it's a lot, I know. Sorry.
No, I'll just throw this out there. I mean, I know that we're in the midst of a whole bunch of stuff right now. I also recognize that kind of pulling this conversation together tonight was, you know, an additional something for you all to do. And I'll just say I appreciate it. For me, it was really helpful to have more of a thoughtful discussion around how you all are looking at the data, kind of from a board perspective, kind of thinking through, you know, the insights that we might want to see on a more regular basis, how we can be supportive, all of those sort of things. So for me, I think it was just really helpful. And as Beth said, this is a really just important kind of step, as we step forward. So thank you. I'll just say thank you, because I know that this was an additional something onto that first slide that Rhonda spoke to at the very, very beginning, of all the things that have happened in the last 3 weeks. So thank you. And I'll give thanks to Jessica, Beth, and Eric, because I know you are board partners on the various committees, and certainly are supportive in different ways on these topics throughout the year in different capacities. So thank you for that too.
Well, like I said, I was glad to have an opportunity to really dive into it. Needed to do that. So things happen for a reason, and this was one that we needed to really look at. And in talking with some of the teachers in some of the buildings, yeah, we needed to really look at it in terms of the process.
Oh. And I'll just add, you kind of mentioned it, but Kevin, I appreciate the idea of partnering with Erin on the staff development too, because if you do staff development right, it's a benefit, right? Like, because usually people hunger for it. And so, partnering with our HR partner on kind of all of those sort of things and making sure that it's, done in a way that's engaging, I think is also a really, really good thing. So I'm glad that you're partnering with our newest member of the team in that way too. It's nice to hear.
Yeah, and I can tell you that some of the research that we came across does deal with employee retention.
Yep.
And that's and she really has been good to work with. So
good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Well, and
it would be really nice if you let Jessica and myself know when you're offering professional development for anything relicensure wise, we would gladly, happily join you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. That's a personal plug because they're teachers. So I'll just say that there. All right. Great. Well, I guess with that, I think we are at the end of our agenda for the night. Anything else before I offer a request to? Well, actually, I think I have one thing I have to say. So before we move on to the next agenda item, anybody have anything else to say? All right. So I don't think so. Sorry, I have to click back to you guys. Nope. All right. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. All right. I'm sorry. Can I just, Rhonda, am I all right to go here? I got to tuck my girls in.
Yes. Good night. Yes, thank you. All done.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Yep.
See you.
All right. So next is just our end of the meeting stuff. So under the header board and superintendent updates and announcement, item 4A is just a notice that the regular meeting of the Board of Education is Monday, December 21st via teleconference. This was our December work session, so there is no pre-board meeting work session. So that is that. And moving on to then, I would accept a motion to adjourn our work session for this evening.
Eric Gordy, I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll
All right,
second.
first from Eric Gordy, you have a second from Jessica Johnson. That was quick, Jessica. All right. Any further discussion about adjourning tonight? No. All right, great. So I'll do a roll call vote since we are virtual. Beth Praska.
Aye.
All right, Kevin Campbell.
Aye.
Brady Anderson. Brady Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Jessica Johnson.
Aye.
Eric Gordy.
Aye.
Amy Edwards. Aye. All right. Motion to adjourn passes. It is 8:19 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.